Hey there, Sumolings, and welcome to Candu's onboarding webinar. As a quick introduction, I'm Georgia. I'm our head of customer here at Candu, so I spend most of my days helping our clients build content, publish content, and get everything installed. And I'm excited to share some of that with you today. As an agenda, we'll go through a welcome. I think we've checked that box. Then we'll jump into what is Candu, which is a question we've been getting a lot recently. We'll look at a couple of use cases of how our clients are currently using it. And then the fun part of the day will actually be going through a more interactive Candu session. So we'll do a quick tour of Candu itself, and then we'll go through and actually create contact cards, install them on a WordPress application, and publish them live. So you can see the process end to end in under 30 minutes. One note is that today we'll be publishing on WordPress because that's what I have set up right now. But if you go into our documentation and look at installation docs, you can install on any different kind of application that you might be running that allows you to add script tags. So please check out our installation docs. This is not the end all be all of how installation works, but it'll just be a great example to give you a sense of it. So let's get started with what is Candu. Is it a website builder? Is it a pop-up? The answer to both of those is no, it's not either of those things. It's actually a really simple UI builder that allows you to use drag and droppable components to create your own UI within an existing website. And the reason that we came up with this is that we used to work at a SaaS company where the engineering team was super busy all the time trying to differentiate our product and make the product itself better, make the logic more intense. And they were doing all these kinds of things. And meanwhile, those of us on the customer team who didn't really have so much coding experience were getting these interesting requests from our customers that we thought would make the experience better, but didn't necessarily, improve the core product. And so we'd beg and beg to get these really simple copy updates or button changes or other things done. And, we'd have to wait many sprints, up to quarters to get things that we felt like, shouldn't take a lot of time. And we felt bad asking our engineers to take time out of their day to make these simple changes, whether it was tooltip changes or release notes changes, any of that kind of stuff that really does improve the customer experience, but doesn't necessarily need to live with engineering. So the idea behind Candu is that now your engineers can take a couple of minutes, or even you can do it yourself with Google Tag Manager or WordPress, and you can add a Candu snippet to a part of the page, and then you can use Candu's drag and drop editor to make all of the updates you want to that new UI. So your engineering team doesn't need to worry about it anymore, and you as a customer person can keep improving on the experience for your users. The other really cool thing, which we aren't going to build out today, but I definitely recommend looking into, is if you send data to Candu, you can use it to do user segmentation. So you can set aside an area of your application, let's say a dashboard page when users log in, and you can actually show different content to different groups of users. A really cool example of this is right now, probably you have maybe, if you have a dashboard page, it's probably pretty generic because it needs to speak to everybody. But there's a world where you could have an onboarding dashboard for your new users that's a checklist that they can run through or hints and tips on how to get set up. And then for people who have been using your site for a really long time and probably don't need to know how to get started, but are more interested in the deeper features, you can do ongoing trainings, or you can do product release notes, things that they'll be more interested in. And you can do that all in the same space within your app. So it actually makes the user experience better. It feels a little bit more personalized and customized, and makes, every login a little bit more relevant, which is awesome. Great. Okay, so that's a little bit about what Candu is. Let's see how people are using it now. The first bucket that we think about is this idea of no code refreshes. So sort of what I was talking about before with when you can't get developer time, a lot of the time you create pretty generic content that needs to speak to all of your users. And that's what a lot of our customers have been going through. This is a great example of a customer that had a dashboard that got updated once a quarter with quarterly release notes. And it was the first page that people saw when they logged in. And the main interaction with that page was people just leaving it to go find whatever tab they wanted. But by using Candu, they've completely revamped the whole page. You can see they made it more personalized. Now the product marketing and product education teams and product teams own it, so they can update it monthly with release notes. They can add new features that they're launching and flag that those are coming. They can add new events that are coming up or webinars that they want people to attend. And it both makes them a little bit more powerful in that they can get some of this messaging that's really relevant to their clients out of email and into the product. And it makes their clients more interested in what this page has to offer them and gets their clients deeper into the product, finding things that maybe they otherwise would have missed. Cool. Another really great example, which we are using ourselves, is for this idea of UI experimentation. Typically, by the time you actually launch a piece of UI into your product, you've done a lot of design thinking about it. You've tested it out with users, because once it goes in your product, you don't get to change it for a long time until it comes back around as another story in your engineering team, or when you have time to revisit it. It makes it really hard. And so the great thing about using Candu is that you can get a sort of MVP UI out, get feedback, and then start improving on it to keep testing what actually resonates with your users. So you don't need to have a perfect V1. You can actually really test with actual users instead of needing to do design interviews and all of these other kinds of things. And finally, a use case I think is really cool is some of our clients have worked with really large enterprises where they don't always get to talk to every person who logs in, but they have really important training content that's relevant, or they want to just make it branded and customized, as you can see here, which we did with our dashboard. And you can use Candu for all of that. So one of our clients was posting these custom webinars they were doing for a specific client on how to use their product. And that way it wasn't getting lost in email. Any user who logged in from that specific client could see that webinar and get up to speed quickly. So that covers what is Candu, how are people using it. Let's jump into the fun part and actually get into the product. All right, so when you log into Candu, this is probably about what you'll see. If you're coming from AppSumo, there's a good chance that you'll have a different announcement bar, because this entire dashboard page is built with Candu. We can do customized announcements. When we launched my webinar series, we added this card. We have these great training videos you can check out. We also learned from AppSumo that a lot of users were getting stuck in installation on this whitelisting step, which we didn't originally have in this onboarding checklist. So we added that in. So if you're watching this and want to get through and publish content, you can either do it with me live now, or you can work your way through this checklist that we've created and updated based on your feedback. The next set of things we'll talk about are content. That's actually where we'll spend most of our time today. This is how you build all of these different things. It's our drag and drop editor. It's a great way to create content without using any HTML or CSS or code in general. Segments are what I was talking about earlier with user segmentation. So if in your installation you want to do segmentation, you can send us user traits and information about your users that pass to your page. Totally optional. You don't have to send us any information about your users either. But you can create user segments using really simple if-then logic and pulling those user traits that you send. And then finally, the last concept is this idea of portals, which is basically just if you've created user segments and you've created a bunch of content for those user segments, portals are just where you say, if it's this group of users, show them this set of content. We won't spend any time on that today, but if that's something you're interested in, please reach out and let us know. Cool. Okay, let's jump into content. So here we'll see all of the content that I've created so far. You'll also see that there's a template library, which I want to spend a little bit of time on because I think it's really valuable. If you're looking at Candu and you're not quite sure what it does or how you can use it, or if you're starting to have ideas percolate about what you'd like to build, but you're not quite sure what that would look like, we've worked with our designer and a few of our customers to create a bunch of sort of best-in-class UI templates for different use cases that you might have. So you can scroll all the way through and take a look at everything that's available here. Or if you have a specific thought about a use case you want to try out, let's say you want to do announcement bars, you can go through and see some of the options that we've created. And we'll take a look today. You can edit these as much or as little as you like to make them your own. Today, I was thinking we'd actually create contact cards. But as you can see, as we're scrolling through here, if you want to create like a video library of video content you've created, or if you want to create little resource cards, all of these things are things that you can click into and test out. Today, I'm going to take the contact card template and hit create content. And then I just need to give it a name. So I'm going to say contact. If you create a lot of content, you can start creating sections, which basically act as folders to keep you organized. I'm not that organized, so I'm going to just hit create, and I can always go back and put it into a folder later. Awesome, cool. So now we see this template is in the editor. We can start playing around with it. As a quick high-level overview of the editor, if I want to add new content to the page, I can just go over here to the palette and drag anything I want onto the page to make it my own. If I'm clicked into an element, you'll see, we'll spend a lot of time on this today, but you'll see this toolbox that pops up that's specific to each element. So in the card, I can do layouting. I can also replace my image or change the pixel size. All of these are things that you can do on the toolbox. Finally, there's this top bar of different tabs. So you can do analytics. Once you publish content, you can see who's seeing it, and you can actually check out every user that's looked at your content. Something I want to spend a little bit of time on right now is the style guide. So Candu is not meant to be like your typical iframe or any kind of block that just sort of looks like it was shoved onto your page. It's really meant to look like your engineering team built it and that it's completely cohesive with the page where you're publishing content. And the style guide is really sort of the magic part of that. So you can go through and click into any element and you can update the font or upload a custom font if you have your own brand. You can also update the colors, sizes, all of the things that really will make it look like your own. You can also update your colors, and those will flow through into things like buttons, badges, cards, all of the different ways that you create a brand and a cohesive image you can set up in the style guide. And one other thing to note about the style guide is that it is global, so it impacts all of your content. So if you have a style sheet and you get tired of looking up your hex colors, you can literally just put them in there once and put the fonts in there once, and it'll pull through to all of the content that you create. Cool. Okay, let's get started editing this card to make it about me. Cool. So if I click into this image, you'll see I have a couple of different options for replacing it. I can add a link. So if I have a Google image or something that I want to link to here, I can do that. Or I can upload it via our media library. So if you have images on your desktop or anything, you can always drop them in or just open through a typical upload. As soon as you've uploaded a photo to Candu, we'll save it for you in your media library. So I've already uploaded my screenshot, so I'll select that. That's too big. I added it with too many pixels, and you'll see over here that now I can control that. I can either set it as a pixel width, which means that it will always be the same size no matter how big or small the screen gets, or I can set it to a percentage of the screen size or the layout size. Today, I'm going to stick with pixels. I think 100 is actually probably about right, but if I want to play around, I can always make it smaller using these arrow keys, or I can just plug in a number if I have a sense of what I want there. Next up, I'm going to highlight the text and I can just replace it. I'm fine with this. I can also change around if I want this to be a little bit bigger. I think I like that, and I'm going to reduce the padding but add more at the top to give myself a little more space. Nice. And then customer success manager is fine. I want to delete this because that's not my email. And if I want to, I can always highlight it and I can add a link to open a mail client. Finally, if I want, I can update this button. So if I click in here, I can change the text around, change what it says. I can also add the link for where it should send people here and choose if I want it to open in a new tab or stay in the same place. I can also open a mail client using this email, or if you already use a guide product like Pendo or Intercom, you can link to those guides here. And that might seem a little unorthodox since a lot of people think that we compete with guides, but we've actually found it to be a very nice complementary product. Typically, guide products will just pop up as your users are trying to navigate through things, and often they'll click out of them because it's not the right moment for them. But if you link them through a Candu button, then they have a little bit more control over when that experience starts for them, so they can opt into doing a tour as opposed to having it forced on them. Cool. Okay, I actually really like this card. I feel good about it. If I wanted to add a card for a teammate, I can also do that here. So I can duplicate it. And if I want them to go side by side, so typically Candu adds content like a Google Doc, so top to bottom. But I can also click into my overall layout of the page and change it from doing a column layout where we add top to bottom to a row layout so that my cards will sit nicely next to each other. And I could go through and update this with all of my coworkers' information. I want to give us time to get through the installation steps. So I'm not going to do that. I'll just keep it for me. Cool. All right, so let's talk about installation. To start installing Candu, you'll go into the piece of content that you've created, and you'll go to the settings page and to the embed tab here on the left. This is all of the code that you need to get started with Candu. So what I'm going to do is just hit copy here. And I'm going to do a really bare bones installation in WordPress. I know a lot of people use things like code adding plugins. I've just downloaded one called Insert Headers and Footers. So I'm just going to go to settings to my plugin, and it offers me an opportunity to add scripts to header, which is what I want. You want to add this into the head of your site. So I just paste in this script tag and hit save. And then the next step here is to add a Candu mount. So that's the selector that tells Candu you have lots of pages, you have lots of different areas in which Candu content could show up. The selector tells Candu where it should show up. And so right now it's pointed to a Candu mount, which is a div that we're going to add now. So we have a little bit of control over where it goes. You can also add it to an existing div by just updating the selector, but I like to add it to a new one so that I have a little bit more control. You'll see my lovely web page, very nautical themed. And I want to add my contact card here. So I'll add an HTML block and I'll paste in my div Candu mount and hit update. And then the last thing that I need to do is to actually tell Candu that it's okay for Candu to publish content to that site. So I'll go into the overall settings of the page, and I'm going to whitelist my site. So I'm telling Candu that it's okay. I'll do that here. And then you can also use wildcards. So if you use subdomains, you can do something like star.zerocodeui.com star. So you can just make sure that like any other page that you want to whitelist is also covered here. Cool. All right. So I've added my script tags to the top. I've whitelisted it. I've added my div to the page. The last thing I need to do is to actually publish the content to go live. So obviously when you're creating content, you don't want your edits to be live to your users as you're doing them. So you can edit as much as you want in the Candu editor. Nothing will happen. Nothing will change on the front end until you hit this publish button right here. I highly recommend downloading the Preview Chrome extension if you haven't yet. It allows you to test out how Candu content looks on different parts of your page before you actually install. It also lets you preview how content looks before you hit this publish button. So definitely super valuable. I'm actually going to skip straight to the publishing steps so you can see how it all works. All right, our content is live. Now, if I go into my actual page, Zero Code UI, and refresh, you'll see that my contact card is now here on the page. So all it takes is script tag, add the div to your page really quickly, create your content, publish it, and you're live. And now if I want anytime to create more of these cards, to have my whole team here, I could create a whole team page. I can do that just using Candu's super simple drag and drop editor instead of needing to go through a lot of different page layouts and other kind of complications. It really adds the extra sort of zing to your page that you can't normally do really easily if you don't have a developer handy. Cool. I hope this helps you have a better understanding of Candu. As you can see, it really is meant to sit as a part of your page and look like it belongs with everything else that you've created. If you have any trouble with any parts of this, we're always here to help. This webinar is the first step, not a last step. So please contact us if you need anything. And as always, we love seeing what people are building with Candu. Please share it with us. We can't wait to see what you build. Thanks so much. Is it possible to target these experiences to a subset of accounts and users versus all? And the answer to that is yes. You can use user segmentation if you send traits to Candu. You can use user segmentation to publish this content to only a subset of your users, as opposed to needing to publish the same content to everyone. Yes, you can also target it even down to the individual user using our user segments. Let's take a look at those really quickly. So right now I'm in this particular demo account, not passing a lot of user traits to Candu, but if I were, I could go into these user properties, which is where those come through, choose if I wanted to do user ID for an individual, I could do an operator, say it's equal to 1, and then I could target content to a single user with this segment. I could also, like in Candu, we pass things like organization ID through here, and you can use the user properties to create an entire account level. What are the typical use cases for WordPress? I think the typical use cases, there are a couple for WordPress. One is this user segmentation route of being able to provide different content for different users. Another really good one is Candu just gives you a little bit more flexibility with your layouting and the content that you're adding. So for some users, it's been a really nice way to change up their page layout. For WordPress, we actually use Candu to add some cards to our community page, which we were using a third-party provider for. And we wanted to create a little bit more of a dynamic look and feel. And so Candu just gives you a little bit more flexibility with what you're doing. How you can do video content in Candu. So let's say instead of wanting this announcement bar, we wanted to do a video explaining how Zoom worked or something along those lines. It's really as simple as just dragging the video player onto the screen. We'll just put it below right now. And then you can link out to whatever video hosting service you use. So YouTube, Vimeo, you can even link SoundCloud if you're just looking for adding a little music to the page. But yeah, you can add video content in really easily using Candu, and you could use user segmentation to target different videos to different sets of users. What does the analytics section provide? Because we haven't published content, you won't be able to see our analytics in here, but I can give you a quick overview of what would be in here. We track total visits over time. So every person who's seen the page that Candu is installed on will get tracked, and we'll also track unique visitors over time. So every different individual who's coming to the page, any interactive element that you add, so a button or a card click or link clicks, things like that, will be added with event tags here. So you can track how many people are clicking on the interactive elements you've added. And if you added something that's more progressive, like a checklist, where you want to see how people are moving through it, if you add the checklist content, you'll get another tab in the analytics section that will tell you how many people are making their way through your checklist and what steps are getting checked off the most. So one last thing, if you were to add a button, you can add the link here, or you can add an email or a guide. And if you go into this interactions tab that pops up, you can add an interaction label. So if you want to make sure you know this button is the get in touch button, you can track that through analytics. You can also push our analytics into Segment if you want to combine them with other sources that you're using. Do you have content versioning? Yes, that is an awesome question. Okay. If you make mistakes that you don't love, it's easy to do things here that you're not quite sure about, or add something that you're not a huge fan of, or have someone on your team do that for you. There's a couple of different options. The first and really simple one is we have an undo and redo button. You can also use your quick keys for that. On a larger scale, if someone's made big changes and you are not a huge fan of them, you can always go to history, and we keep a full content history log of changes that have been made. So you can go back and revert to a previous version. Another thing I often recommend doing, especially if you're about to try and make big changes to content that you've published, is to use this clone content button. So you can have a second version of it that isn't published anywhere, and you can always sort of save your original version and then have sort of a sandbox that you can play around with a little bit more while still having that original to go back to.